Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new series on my channel. This is part 1 and I hope you guys stick around for more. The Batman Arkham series are some of my favorite games and Arkham Knight might just be my favorite game of all time. I absolutely love these games and I wanted to do some kind of a challenge run for Arkham Knight. I thought of doing a no-hit run, but once I realized all the suffering I'd have to go through to get it, I decided not to, at least for now. I wanted to do something unique, something that no one else has really done before, and as of making this, I was unable to find anyone who has done this challenge. What is it, you ask? Well, you read the title, it's the Gadget only run. If you've never played any of the Batman Arkham games, you're probably wondering what this run entails. Basically, in the game, Batman has access to many gadgets including batterangs, the batclaw, explosive gel, and many others. My goal is to get to the end of the game using only gadgets, or at least get as far as I can. It sounds easy enough, but these gadgets are not meant for defeating enemies, and as you'll see in this video, using certain gadgets can have consequences. Before we get started, let's go over the rules. Rule number 1, I must use gadgets as much as I can. If I absolutely cannot progress doing this, I have to defeat any enemies with countering only unless the game forces me to use a specific move. Rule number 2, the Batmobile counts as a gadget. The game requires you to be in it quite a lot and there is pretty much no way around it. The cape and grappling hook also count as gadgets. Rule number 3, the only move I'm allowed to use other than gadgets is evading or rolling. These are the main rules of the challenge, and if anything changes or I need to correct something, I will address it. Now let's begin the gadget only run. The game starts just like any other, cremating the Joker. I guess you could say the cremation table counts as a gadget, but whatever. The beginning of the game is obviously played like normal, and there isn't much to discuss. I suppose the gun counts as a gadget, but since you don't need to shoot it to progress, I opted not to. It's a better outcome for the character anyways. After talking to Gordon, we arrive at our very first combat encounter. Going into this, my main plan was to use explosive gel to take out some enemies and weaken the others to the point that I can finish them off with batterangs. The testing I did for this was done on my 240% character, and I didn't realize that for the explosive gel to take out enemies, we needed to unlock a skill. For this first encounter, I mostly used quickfire explosive gel, which doesn't have much effect, and the charge attack. In Arkham Knight, sometimes some enemies will charge at you, enabling you to throw a battering at them to instantly take them out. This attack is extremely useful in the early game. Look at the game trying to tell me how to strike. It has no idea what I'm doing. After the encounter, we unlock the Batmobile and play through the game normally. And no, interrogating the driver does not count as an attack, nor does Batman countering his attack. Also, why is there a battering stuck to his hand? The game is taking gadget only a little too seriously, I guess. After this, we head over to the game's second combat encounter. This one was a lot harder than the previous one. You see, the most common way I would fail this challenge was by accidentally clicking an attack or counter button. I have to be really careful about this because the counter range is very large, as you see here. I ended up repeating the same procedure as the first encounter, wait for charge attacks and use them to take out enemies. This next part really scared me because I thought I would have to use a takedown to enter, but thankfully the game let me smash through the window normally. Another massive concern is this grab attack. Obviously breaking out of it would violate the rules, so I basically have to get punched to get out of it. This can be a problem if the enemies take too long to hit me because your health will slowly drain if you are kept in this state. This was also the encounter where I started using smoke bombs, which are proven to be very useful throughout this run. Anyways, I repeated the charging process again and got through the level. After the next cutscene, we are introduced to the remote Batmobile and tank combat. I already said that this counts as a gadget, but it still felt a little weird basically playing one half of the game normally and the other half in a challenge mode. To combat this, I decided I would try to use the tank critical hit point as much as I can. If you don't know, the tanks in Arkham Knight have a small glowing light on one side of the cannon. If you shoot this light with the Vulcan gun, the light fire mode, the tanks will instantly be destroyed. I wasn't super strict about this rule, and if I forgot about it and accidentally used the cannon, I didn't bother resetting and just continued. Next up, we have the Batmobile combat tutorial. This was just more practice with the tank combat and wasn't really anything too special. I did have to use the missile barrage to continue, but like I said, I wasn't that strict with the Batmobile rules. Completing this tutorial granted me one Wayne Tech upgrade point, which I used to unlock the explosive gel instant takedown ability. This was insanely useful, and I was essentially planning to use this throughout the entire run. The next encounter was more of the same drone combat, nothing much happened here. After it was over, we headed to the GCPD building to put Poison Ivy in a holding cell. It was here where I decided to pick up the remote electrical charge gadget. I did have to punch the glass to obtain it, but there was no other way to get it, and it is something that you do have to obtain later in the game anyway. Might as well get it now. Since it's not an enemy, I didn't have much of a problem punching the glass to get the weapon. After obtaining the weapon, I was presented with some side quests. I chose to ignore them for now and probably won't be doing them for this run. Some of these side quests would be impossible, specifically the Lucius Fox mission where the only thing you do is land a counter. So I think I'm going to pass on side quests for now. Some more combat-oriented missions would be possible, but they would be extremely difficult. The Deacon Blackfire mission is one of them because you have to fight a ton of enemies. I chose to follow the main story and I went to the clock tower. Next, we head to Panessa Studios to fix the antenna. I obtained the power winch, a gadget for the Batmobile, and completed the level normally. After powering up the antenna, I needed to head to a different one to find Scarecrow's location. This is the part of the game that introduces Predator, or Stealth. Let me tell you, Stealth was a lot harder than I expected it to be. I went into it planning to use explosive gel, and that is exactly what I did for the first enemy. I snuck up behind him, placed the explosive gel, grappled away, and detonated it. While the other guard was going to investigate, I planted a couple other spots of gel. All was going well until something unexpected happened.
Heads up, it's a plastic explosive!
The guard shot the gel, blowing it up. I've played this game for 211 hours at the time of writing this, and I have never seen an enemy shoot explosive gel. I never even knew that was possible. Upon further reflection, this was sort of a way to prevent you from spamming explosive gel, but I think the more enemies that notice it, the further away they'll see it. You'll see this later on, but some enemies would discover the gel but also be in range to be knocked out by it. I ended up taking out the second enemy by using it, however. Guess he was too focused on looking for me that he didn't notice. Next, we call Lucius and unlock the new Batsuit. This suit is really cool, and it comes with a bunch of new features like fear takedowns, ejects, better grapnel boost, and an awesome design. With this new suit comes a few new tutorials for Predator, ejecting and gliding, boosting, fear takedowns, and throw counters. I really needed the Wayne Tech points you get for completing them, but I knew I was only able to do a couple. I did the boost and gliding ones, but I skipped the others. I suppose I could have tried the Predator one, but I had a feeling that it would have forced me to use silent takedowns. After the tutorials, I needed to deal with the final 3 guards inside the building. They were armed and had hostages, so getting seen was not an option. I tried luring them out with almost every gadget, but I was unsuccessful. Unfortunately, this challenge has already met its end so early on. The game forces you to use a fear takedown on the 3 enemies inside, and there is no foreseeable way around this. So I caved in and took out the 3 enemies with a fear takedown. I suppose you could argue that the fear takedown is a gadget because it's part of the suit, but it doesn't really feel like one, and from now on, I'm not allowing it. The game kind of forced me to here. I leveled up and picked ballistic armor. I had used those tutorial points on the batclaw firearm disarm and the melee armor. After this encounter, I figured out Scarecrow was at Ace Chemicals and took the thumbnail for the video. I went over to Ace Chemicals and had my first encounter with the mysterious Arkham Knight. Ace Chemicals was a surprisingly difficult challenge, and as of writing this, I still haven't finished it. After entering the facility, we have our second stealth section of the game. In the beginning, I kept using my explosive gel just like I did before, and it was sort of working for the most part. Eventually, the enemies kept discovering the gel, so I had to resort to sneaking and placing the gel right behind their backs. The problem with this is the controls. I played on PC, and the aim gadget button is the exact same as the silent takedown button. I kept accidentally using stealth takedowns instead of aiming. It was really annoying and I had to reset many times because of this. Eventually, I tried rebinding my keys, but it is impossible to separate the 2 controls. After continuing to fail over and over again and failing to make any progress, something clicked in my head. I can't separate the controls, but the controls are already separated, just not with my controller. The 2 binds are different on controller, so I rushed into the other room and got my PS4 controller and started the level again. I know it looks like I'm using an Xbox controller, but I was not. I don't know why some games do that. Anyways, the controller was a success. I haven't played Arkham Knight in a while before this, and especially not on controller, so it did take me a bit to relearn all the binds. I continued using my explosive gel strategy and got rid of the first 3 enemies. Once I got down to 2 enemies left, things started getting trickier. They were spotting my explosive gel from very far away, making setting traps almost impossible. I did get a couple of successful explosions, but it only stunned the enemies instead of knocking them out. At this time, I just figured that I didn't place the gel correctly and continued trying. Then something strange happened. I got one of the enemies completely stuck in a wall. He could not move and I couldn't pull him out of it. I managed to bug him by bombarding him with batterangs until he was shoved into a wall. There was nothing I could do and I would have to reset. It was now when I learned the dark truth. The final enemy was immune to explosive gel. I tested it. I hit him 7 times with direct explosions that should have immediately knocked him out. I'm guessing this is another way to prevent spamming explosive gel. The enemies become completely immune to it when you use it enough times. Running out of options, I decided not to cheat but to expand the rules. Even though it is mostly punching, I decided to allow line launcher takedowns. You still need to use a gadget for them to work, and I don't think I had many, if any, options remaining. I reset the level to fix the bug and I repeated the process. The first 3 taken out with the explosive gel, and the other 2 finished off with line launcher takedowns. And finally, after 20 plus minutes, I had finished the level and was finally able to access the next part of the area. There is a group of enemies guarding a crane that you will have to use later. I decided to work on that group of enemies now just to get it out of the way. And it was going pretty well. I was using a new strategy where I used smoke bombs to stun the enemies and explosive gel to finish them off, and this was extremely useful. I did accidentally use a cape stun, but it didn't hit any enemies. I've been thinking about if this counts as a gadget or not, and I still haven't decided yet, so I reset and tried again. Using the smoke bomb explosive gel strategy, I was able to beat the first part of the encounter. The second part, however, was a completely different story. This is when the ninja enemies are introduced, and man are they tough. Nothing I tried really worked, and they would barely be stunned by smoke bombs and explosive gel didn't affect them at all. I was getting pretty low on health and decided to leave and come back later. After locating the Ace Chemicals workers, I decided to head to the one that allows you to bring in the Batmobile. Since my health was very low, I reloaded the game, but that did not fix that problem in the slightest. I had to beat this entire room with barely taking any damage. And surprisingly, I pulled it off. It was a little tricky finding the smash window prompt, and I was worried that I would have to use a takedown, but I didn't. Smoke bomb strat came in handy once again. I did get hit once by placing explosive gel, and I thought I died because of the sound effect, but somehow I survived on 1 HP. Oh yeah, by the way, I am playing on easy because the enemies do not need any more health. I might try this challenge again on harder difficulty someday, but let's see how hard the rest of the game is. I brought in the Batmobile and defeated the tanks normally. It was then when I had a great idea. Remember how I just abandoned the ninja fight? Well, they were all still on the platform and I was able to just reach them with the riot suppressor. I used it to take out 3 of the 4 enemies. I know this seems like cheating, but there aren't many spots in the game where this can happen, and I already established that the Batmobile is a gadget. I had trouble reaching the final ninja and decided to worry about him later. It was now where I had my first face-to-face with the Arkham Knight. I used the remote Batmobile to disrupt his speech as usual, and took out the room with smoke bombs and explosive gel yet again. It was here where I started wondering if Batmobile-assisted takedowns were considered gadgets or not, and right now I'm sitting on no. The same goes for environmental takedowns, but these might change later on. I rescued the guard and took him back to Gordon. This made me very happy because I was able to get a vantage point of the final ninja and I took him out with the riot suppressor. I did the crane puzzle normally and headed into the next room. This is where medics are introduced and these enemies are a big problem. They aren't threatening in terms of difficulty, but they can revive other enemies, making the encounters even longer. Fortunately, they have limited revives, and I don't believe they can revive ninjas and other special enemy types, which is great. To rescue the final worker, I had to get through the hardest combat encounter yet. This is the first time where ninjas are mixed in with regular enemies, and this was very concerning. The area was indoors and underground, so I had no Batmobile to help me. For the normal enemies, I tried using explosive gel, but it was much harder because the ninjas were unaffected by the smoke bombs and I could easily get hit placing the gel. Remember, it's not just striking that's against the rules. I can't counter either unless there's no way to defeat an enemy gadget only. The grab attack got me a few times too, which is still a very easy way for enemies to drain my health. Things were not looking good. The mix of normal enemies and ninjas was a real challenge and none of my gadgets were very effective. The only things I discovered about the ninjas were that rolling stuns them, which doesn't really help me, and the remote electrical charge mildly affects them. Neither of these were particularly useful. Seeing no other options this early into the game, I decided that countering the ninjas was the only way to stop them. I did some testing and found that if I countered the ninjas only, I was able to defeat them. No striking needed, at least. Something still wasn't right, and I feel like I was missing something. There has to be a way to beat them, so I did some testing. I had a couple ideas. One was using the line launcher to kick the enemies, and the other was using a smoke bomb to confuse them into attacking their allies. I hopped onto my 240% character and tested both ideas on regular enemies. If these ideas worked for regular enemies, that does not mean they worked for ninjas, but if they did not work for regular enemies, then there is no way they would work on ninjas. The line launcher was completely useless. Normal enemies just dodged out of the way when I tried to hit them, and if normal enemies can dodge it, the ninjas can definitely dodge it. The smoke bomb idea, on the other hand, was extraordinarily difficult to pull off. I tested this for about 20 to 30 minutes, and I only had enemies punch each other twice. And I would have to do this multiple times just for one ninja, and there were 3 of them. Plus, the ninjas may just dodge out of the way. This strat may work, but every encounter would take literal hours, assuming that the ninjas don't dodge. At this point in the game, there is literally no way that you can defeat the ninjas gadget only. If you guys have an idea that you think might work, let me know in the comments. And countering still is a risky strat because I cannot counter basic enemies, so I had to be careful when I pressed the button. Finally, I got through the encounter and rescued the worker, but I did have to counter 3 ninjas. We then come to our very first boss fight, the helicopter. This fight is very easy, and while I landed a few 60mm shots at the beginning, I decided to use the Vulcan gun only for the rest of the fight. And it still did a lot of damage to the helicopter, and it wasn't much of a challenge to beat. And that concludes part 1 of the Batman Arkham Knight gadget only run. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and subscribe for part 2 coming very soon. Have a good one.